Welcome to another edition of BASTA TV here from the BASTA 2014 in Mainz. With me is Tarek Madkour. He is the program manager in the Visual Studio unit, responsible for the IDE Visual Studio in Redmond. And he just gave a keynote about the abilities of capabilities of Visual Studio in integrating open source tools like Xamarin and Cordova in Visual Studio to support C# developers and web developers to produce web apps and applications which can use websites as apps, as native apps on different platforms. Now, Tarek, what me interests most at the moment is Cordova and Xamarin are open source tools, and you as Microsoft are supporting them now. How is that? From the traditional or cultural perspective, and how is it from a technical perspective for you to integrate them so deeply into the IDE?
Yeah, so it's actually a very interesting shift that I've witnessed in my career over Microsoft. I've been with Microsoft for quite a while, and many years, and right now it's very nice to see Microsoft embracing open source a lot more. Right now, for example, we look at developers, and one of our goals in Visual Studio is to meet developers where they are. You know, developers want to do many different things, and one of the things that we see that developers need to do at this point is target mobile devices. And unlike the desktop, where it was clear that there was only one platform that you needed to target on the desktop, for mobile, there's no clear one platform that you need to target. For most people, they at least at a minimum have to target two platforms, iOS and Android, and in a lot of cases, you know, Windows also makes sense, and many places there's more than just those three that you want to target. So as a developer, you need to target multiple platforms and multiple devices. So it was important that in Visual Studio, to remain the world-class tool that we are and to enable developers to do all the activities that they need, it was important to be able to target those platforms. And you know what? It is clear that in many cases, open source tools are a great way to do that. So if you think, for example, about as a JavaScript or web developer, you're familiar with HTML5 and CSS and JavaScript, and you want to be able to take your website to the mobile world, and then you want to be able to package that website and put it as an app. Well, there's already a great framework for that, and we looked at, you know, many alternatives, and Apache Cordova is a great one. And one of the things that we do then is make sure that, you know, it's good to see that Apache Cordova works very well on Windows too, and then Visual Studio then becomes a matter of adopting that open source tool. It's definitely a change in culture at Microsoft, where in the past we would have probably, you know, created our own alternative to that. But today's world is fast moving, and devices are coming in very fast, and things are changing very quickly. And to replicate everything is just not the smartest choice. So we have a strategy at Microsoft where we are embracing open source where it makes sense. And one of those places is Apache Cordova. And they have a great product. We have a very good partnership in terms of what we can do. And the value that we can definitely provide developers is having the great Visual Studio tools work across all these platforms. So now you can get, you know, Visual Studio, I think, you know, I was a developer using Visual Studio before I started on the Visual Studio team almost 15 years ago, and even then I loved Visual Studio for, you know, great editing, great building, great debugging. It's a great tool for me as a developer, and it has progressed over the years. To be able to continue to get all those capabilities in today's world across all these multiple devices is a great thing. So the fastest way to do that is through adopting something open source like Cordova. Xamarin is an interesting, slightly different story. You know, Xamarin is based on Mono, which is open. Xamarin itself obviously is a private company, and and we have a partnership with them. They're building on open source Mono, but they are you know, we have a great partnership with Xamarin, so we're not, you know, building a replica of it or building you know, something parallel to it. It's a great partnership with one of our partners in the ecosystem. They have a great support for taking you as a C# developer and making the whole world available to you. You know, when we started C# at Microsoft and .NET at Microsoft, it was a great way to target applications across the broad Microsoft ecosystem. And one of the beautiful things that Xamarin did is that they took that and they extended it to the rest of the world. So, you know, when iPhones came out and Android phones and all the other devices, you know, whether glasses or watches or anything at this point, they did a great job at exposing those to in C#. So what we're doing is working with them on making sure that they have a fantastic experience, and on making sure that our developers get to know that there's this story that is beautiful, that you can use Visual Studio to target iOS and Android with the same skills that you have as C# developers. So I think it made sense here to have that partnership with a private company, and it made sense to bet on the open source with Cordova, and we're not afraid to do that. I think we think it's in the benefit of our developers, and we will do it because it's in the benefit of our developers.
Yeah, okay. And that also means that you have to follow open standards, which are not given by Microsoft, which people are used to actually. And how is that? I mean, what has happened if there's something completely new and you have to react on it? Is the partnership that tight that you can say, okay, if that is part of the new standard, please inform us how to integrate it, or how do I have to imagine this way of working together?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Mirko. It's one of the very interesting things about the web is that it's a place where the standards are not controlled by one person or one company. The web is for everybody, and there's a consortium that actually handles this, and Microsoft as one player needs to participate. So it's definitely a very different experience for us from C#, for example, where while the C# itself is open, and now we're also going further in the openness of C# with the creation of the .NET Foundation, and with open sourcing of the C# compilers in Roslyn. But for web, we're not even the ones in the driver's seat creating that openness. It is already open, and we just have to participate as a participant. So it's definitely, we're learning a lot about how to participate in standards discussions, how to influence for the right thing for developers, and how to follow. And it's something that it's an interesting learning opportunity for Microsoft. I mean, you've seen Microsoft with web standards in Internet Explorer, for example, and we've had a learning there about the importance of following those standards, and I think we're taking that learning and following it with what we need to do for languages in Visual Studio. It's definitely a place where we don't control the language, we don't control the standard. It's important to be credible, to continue to follow that standard. So it's a lot of hard work, and also a lot of partnerships with people who can help us follow these. So it's ultimately it's good for developers, but it's definitely a lot of hard work, and it's very different from the original days of .NET, where was very Microsoft controlled, to now where even the thing that we used to really control strongly, we're opening and making sure that it's available for everyone, so we can make it lots of places. I think the ideal part here is, with that openness, is the ability to take it to the different platforms, and the ability to make it work for all the different devices that we want. And that's what developers need. So I think it's very hard to do that if you're not going to be open and ready to collaborate with everybody.
Yeah, we are talking about a lot of different devices and platforms, and we're talking about a tool which enables the developer to reach all these platform and devices, and they are using their C# knowledge or their web development knowledge, but nevertheless, so the tools are supporting them. It might be difficult to do everything right in targeting the new platforms and devices. How do you support them? Is that their problem? You say, we do the integration and now start because you know C# and we can help you with C#, but the rest is your problem? Or is there kind of support for all these different platforms and devices which you give your C# and web developers? Yeah,
one of the important values that Visual Studio has had over the years, and you can think of it as one of the cultures of Visual Studio, is that is the integration, right? It is, and that's why we call it the integrated development environment. It's basically what it is, and that integration to us means that as a developer, even if you need to target many platforms, even if you need to get things that were not created by Microsoft, they need to be integrated together. We can't ask you as a developer, we don't think it's a good experience for you as a developer to have to go download one tool from one place and another tool from one place, and maybe use this editor here and that Visual Studio part here, and then hope that it works together. And if it doesn't work, you're kind of on your own, or one of them gets updated, it breaks something else. We give you a package. It's a complete package, and it's a package that enables you to go from A to Z, from file, new project, I want a hybrid web application or a new Xamarin portable class library, and go all the way from creating it to using it in your projects, to building it on the different devices, to testing it, running in an emulator, to packaging it and getting ready to put it in the App Store. And all of these with a single acquisition, a single installer is how we view it. So that's the first part of helping developers, is actually not having them worry about how do these things work together and do I have the right things and what did I miss. Just getting them to be ready to get started with just a one click. So that's important to us. Definitely education is going to be a big part of this, right? As you say, we definitely care about giving people tools that rely on, make use of their existing knowledge. So if you're a C# developer, with the Xamarin tools and with the support that you have in Visual Studio, you can really build on top of what you already know. But in addition to that, there's lots of learning that we have to give to developers in terms of, for example, with Xamarin, how do you create the UIs for the different platforms? Well, that's a little bit different than, for example, if you're using Windows Forms. So first, we try to make things in a similar way, so there are similar designers, similar things, so that you don't have to learn completely different things. But we also have very good documentation and very good videos. Whether you go to Channel 9 or Xamarin themselves as a partner, they are really great at creating some of the content, a lot of the content actually. And I think between the good user education and good videos and blogs that we have, in addition to actually having the product designed with the Visual Studio spirit of integration and having an end-to-end complete experience, I think that really helps developers.
Okay, let's come to the last question. And I'd like to have an outlook on what do we have to expect from the next versions of Visual Studio. Can you give us some insights? What will come and what will be really interesting, your point of view? Yeah, definitely. I think I definitely can't talk about everything that we're doing, but I can shed some light about some interesting things that are happening. I think one of the most interesting things obviously is that Visual Studio is about a tool for productivity, right? And we really value that as a developer, you're going to look at Visual Studio and say, this is the best tool that I can use to accomplish my job. And for that, we look at your core editing and building and debugging, and as a tool, we're definitely making a lot of improvements there. So as you should always expect that with the next release of Visual Studio, you're going to have really good diagnostics tools, you're going to have really good editing capabilities and improvements in that space that are beyond what you've seen in previous releases. So I think that's definitely one thing to look forward to. Another thing to look forward to is this whole multi-device development that we're creating and targeting multiple devices. We really just started, and there's a lot more to do in that space, and I think you should continue to see innovation coming from Microsoft in that regard. And when we talk about new things like multi-device development, I think it's also important to not forget things that people already do today. You're doing desktop development, you're doing website development, ASP.NET development, and there are tremendous improvements that are happening in those areas as well. So for example, if you look at ASP.NET, we've already just announced the ASP.NET version the next one, and there's some really good improvements there. If I recommend that the audience kind of go search for what we've announced there on some of our blogs, some really good support for ASP.NET developers coming down the pipeline that really enables them to do a lot more than they were able to do before. So I think whether it comes to productivity, or whether it comes to targeting new scenarios with devices and mobile, or whether it's just improvements in things that we're already really good at, making those even better, like ASP.NET or like desktop development, I think all around you should see some of that coming in Visual Studio. Okay, thank you very much, Tarek. And as Tarek just said, Microsoft has started to implement all this stuff for the multi-device. That's a good point for you as developers to start too and give feedback to Microsoft, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.